G'day everybody, James from markets.com.au here, and today we are joined by a Mr. Jesse Willcox from Lambert Willcox Estate Agents. Jesse, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you for coming in. So today we wanted to talk about the prestige market and the market in general with you, Jesse. I know that you specialise in the prestige side of property. And so let's start initially with your CV in under 1 minute if you can.
About me?
About you.
Yep.
What's your journey to this point?
Went to university.
Yep.
Was a budding journalist, wanted to get into TV presenting, which I'm doing kind of now, which is exciting.
Good man.
But went overseas, met a few real estate agents overseas, had some family members in real estate as well, and I came back from the States and thought I'd give it a crack. Got into a internship role and worked from receptionist up to where I currently stand, which is Director of Lambert Willcox Estate Agents over kind of a 10-year span.
Wow. So you've seen it from the beginning.
Yep.
And you've seen every role now. The same as your business partner Mitchell, by the sounds of things. He said that he started in a similar role.
Yeah. And again, we think that's probably the best way to do things if you are a kind of a youngish real estate agent, to start from the ground up, because you learn all those niggly things that you need to know. Then now we're directors, and we can kind of deal with things that might seem small now. And you can sympathise with the staff that are with you because you know what they're going through and you've seen it before. Exactly right. Very good. So then, what was the journey like then from beginning there at the front desk and now moving into the prestige and being a principal and director of your company? What was the journey like from a learning perspective? Amazing. Yeah. In terms of, I was lucky enough to find something that I love doing. So, when you go to work and you really genuinely like being there, you start to pick things up and you start to learn, and you're kind of a sponge. And for us, it was kind of for me, the perfect transition into being a director, learning all those things. But from an educational standpoint, I don't think there could have been any better kind of qualification process. And again, for young people coming in, we say go and do that exact way. You learn all the lessons from how hard it can be for the struggling agents, which we were once too, and are now, in some senses. Always. But and then and then it makes you more humble when you are getting those wins, because you know where you came from and you know how hard it was to get where we are now. Good man. And so how did you get into the high end, in the sense of what made you stick around the high end? I had a piece of advice when I was really young, really early 20s, and that was start where you want to finish. And I really took that very, very literally, and I thought, hey, why bang my head against a brick wall and stay in a low-end market when I don't want to be there? And that's something, again, I kind of took as a fact, and I went straight to the market where I wanted to be, which happened to be waterfront housing, and I was lucky enough to have a couple of good transactions, and that kind of snowballed into momentum, where we currently stand. Yeah, that's fantastic. So then, if we wanted to give some tips to people, I think you've covered it somewhat in making sure that they start from the bottom, but what would be another sort of important thing for budding real estate agents to be thinking about? Big thing for me, depending on where you're at in your career, work ethic is fundamentally the underpinning factor in all of this. You can't just kind of stroll into the high end of the market and kind of be successful overnight. The reality is you need to work hard and you need to earn your stripes in the industry. But the second thing to that, so once you kind of outwork everyone and you know it's what you want to do, then I always say to everyone, be yourself. Show your personality, have a laugh, do all those things, because I think something that young agents do, agents at large do, is they kind of fit into this box and they think that they've got to say certain things a certain way or act a certain way. And for me, I think it's the complete opposite. If you can show a bit of personality and shine outside the box, I think that can help a lot. And that's something that I think we've done quite effectively. Yeah, because at the high end, you're generally dealing with vendors, and this is obviously my thoughts. I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but you're generally dealing with vendors that are at the higher end, and they're in real professionals that have got a career behind them, or they're in the middle of quite a successful career, and I don't think that they have the time to be mucked around with. They would rather the transparency. Again, so if it's underpinned with hard work and they know that that's where it's coming from, so if you've earned your stripes, as I said before, then they're going to listen to you. And whether it be in the high end or the low end, if you are relatable and if someone likes being around you, more than likely they're going to want to do business with you. And again, that's a real foundation for us, and it has been moving forward, and that is be yourself, but outwork everyone. And if you can do those two things effectively, you can really push into that high-end market. There's no reason why you can't, rather than being your typical robot that doesn't look out, doesn't get creative, which in the current market we need to do. We need to get creative.
It seems to be changing every day, and your industry certainly has.
Yep.
Have you? How have you noticed the digital age and adapting with it? Even though I think you may have started just at the beginning of the digital side of the marketing, how are you adapting with it?
Well, we're exactly right. We're very fortunate in terms of, I think that wave hit us when we were young agents, so it kind of comes as second nature in a lot of senses. But we're leveraging it as much as we can. But we're big with video, we're big with interactive video, we're big with social media. All those things we take as massive priorities. But going back to young agents or budding real estate agents, whether it be younger or older, we don't think that's the be all and end all. It's nice to have a social media presence, but what we find is that a lot of agents are concentrating more about what they're doing online than what they're doing out there in the field in terms of
the coalface.
Exactly, in terms of doing the transactions, getting the listings, and then from there the secondary thing should be profile, which social media happens to be a part of. So again, we've been really lucky with that. I think that we're kind of on the forefront of that in a lot of ways, and again we'll heavily invest in that in the future, but it's not the be all and end all. Good,
because once again, work ethic.
Exactly.
Will get you through it.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So then, how big is your team there at Lambert Willcox at the moment?
There was at one stage 7 of us. We've actually just tapered back down to 5 of us in total.
Okay, understood.
But right now it's a bit of a moving animal. We're kind of just working those things out as we speak, because as I mentioned before, the market's doing funny things. We want to make sure that we're not too exposed, and that being said, we don't want to be underexposed either. We need to make sure that we're ready. And the big thing is, can we adequately take care of our current clients or the clients we'd like to have in the future? And the answer is yes now, absolutely. And that's something that, again, we'll absolutely prioritise. Number one is serviceability of our current sellers and buyers.
Yeah, because it seems to be that these monoliths are moving through the market and sort of cutting their own paths, and it's important for, and I would consider us as more of a, for lack of a better term, a startup style of property developer, and you guys are a startup style of a real estate agency, and being really nimble, I think, because knowing what a market trend is and then trying to manoeuvre your way through the giants to get your share of the market.
100%, and a lot of that's kind of, you got to go through the process. You need to go through those teething issues. At one stage we wanted to grow really quickly, and we thought that was a good thing to do, and then we learned through experience that that's probably not the best way to sell property and increase profitability. So we need to take all those things into consideration, and you don't know until you know, if that makes sense. And we had a couple of agents working for us, and was it the right thing at the right time? Maybe, maybe not. And again, it's all underpinned by, are our clients happy? And in this case, I think at the moment we're really, really lucky with where we sit.
Very good. So let me ask you then about some of these trends and what you're noticing. Now, I know that we can't take everything that you say for gospel, because markets change all the time, but this is more what you're seeing out there, being on the forefront of the market. What are you noticing are some of the trends that are starting to show their head on at least on the Gold Coast where you're working now, and in the higher end of the market? What are you seeing?
Again, with the broader market, we always warn people that our commentary is quite specific, because we work such a fractured market. I work the high end of the market, and we don't have an incredibly large amount of listings, so my commentary can only be on very specific areas. And what we're finding is that the locals are the absolute drivers right now.
Okay, interesting.
We saw a big wave of internationals a few years ago. Off the back of that, what we typically see is the interstate market push through, and we've experiencing that now. We saw more of that a couple of years ago and last year particularly. But now the Gold Coast locals, we love our city, and rightfully so. So at the moment, that certainly seems to be a big driving force in every market across the board, but particularly with the high end at the moment. We know that, for me personally, I know that all my hot buyers right now, the guys that are calling me every day saying, hey, what's the new stock? 99% of them would be locals.
Okay, fantastic. That's really interesting. So those interstate buyers, the Sydney, Melbourne, and obviously New South Wales, Victoria buyers, are they still here as well?
100%. And again, touching on what we discussed before about the kind of online strategy and things like that, we need to make sure that we're in front of those consumers, because they are still certainly a big demographic we're wanting to get in front of. But I think that the locals really are the driving force currently. But when you couple that with a good percentage of interstate buyers, then it is kind of a perfect recipe to still get good transactions at the moment.
Yeah, excellent. So then, are they looking for the big homes, or are you noticing they're going into the luxury sort of apartment space?
Well, I can't comment too much on the apartment space because, again, specialising in the housing market, that's where I'm at. But what we understand right now is that there's certainly a lot of desirability to get into specific areas in that high end of the market. We know that one of the most important factors for most of our consumers is aspect. You know, it's one thing to be a waterfront buyer, but it's another thing to be a north facing or east facing or point position or main river buyer. So there's always different nuances, and what we typically find is that a northeast facing waterfront property, whether it be a knockdown or a fully established home, has got more interest and more activity than what we would say, for example, a west facing property, particularly this time of year, because it is hot here on the Gold Coast. So again, we take all that into account, and when we're conversing with our buyers, make sure we're very conscious of those trends particularly.
So for people at home, if they wanted to know a couple of the points that people are looking for, aspect is one that you've touched on now. So you want on the coast to be looking north or northeast?
Yeah, typically across the eastern seaboard of Australia, northeast is ideally where you want to be, and I think that's kind of the general consensus across the board. And then typically south facing is good, west facing is also good, so it's hard. I don't like to kind of
no, I hear you. Orientation's an interesting one because it depends on the person.
Exactly
naturally.
right. Like for me personally, I really like west facing because typically your pool's on the western side of the property, so the sun is there in the afternoon when you'd like to go swimming. So for me, it makes sense to have a west facing property as long as you've got good air conditioning and I guess those things in process to make it the livability factor.
You're out in the office as well, so by the time you get home, let's say it's early evening, things have cooled down somewhat. Then you can air it out, and then everything's good to go. I've lived on a west facing.
Yeah, exactly. And again, you always account for your buyers and what their movements are as well. Like for example, tonight I've got 3 open homes back to back, all waterfront properties. And again, just trying to open up to a different demographic, particularly again the locals, because they're the ones that are going to be finishing work between 3, 4, 5. So if they can go through the open home between 6 and 8 this evening, then that's going to work for them, as opposed to just saying Saturday, Sunday, middle of the day, for example. So we're very conscious to change those around depending on who we're working with.
So adapting to the market as always. So when people are looking at your properties and trying to find a waterfront property, what trends are you starting to notice? Do they want to be on smaller canals, or do they want main river, or what are the trends generally?
Again, typically speaking, main river is always a big front winner. And what we often find with main river is that it's usually a secondary waterfront purchase. Usually it's someone upsizing from a canal somewhere, or someone upsizing from a dry block, typically to get onto the main river, because they know that particularly here on the Gold Coast, you've got better access to the broadwater, which means better boat, better fun on the weekends.
Which is always important. If you're working hard, you've got to be able to get out there and enjoy the place you're living in. Have there been a rise in the baby boomers or retirees? Have you noticed anything like that in the last couple of months?
Absolutely. That's always a big driving force, but I think particularly last couple of years we've seen a lot of that people coming up from Sydney, Melbourne, cashing out on what was a very, very hot market. So a lot of them coming up capital rich and saying, hey, you know what, we want that warmer weather. And particularly right now with the Gold Coast infrastructure and what we offer kind of on a global basis, it really is second to none, and for the older demographic, they just simply love it. And why wouldn't you?
Yeah, exactly. It's been a beautiful day today, and it normally is, although it's getting a bit hot.
Every day of the year.
So, buyers looking to upgrade, what would be your 3 tips of when they're investigating? What is a good question to ask of an agent? It's a tough one.
Yeah, that is a tough one. I guess for me personally, it just depends on, are they looking to renovate? Are they looking for a brand new construction? Are they looking for a specific order orientation? So again, there's so many nuances to that. But for me, brick construction typically is very well received, whether it be a renovator or an established home. I think the quality in the build structure is a big thing at the moment we're finding, particularly with our internationals. They're very, very clear with looking for good quality, potentially concrete constructions if they can, even if it means a bit of work.
Okay, so solid build. And would you recommend people request a building and pest inspection on that property?
Of course, absolutely. So we'd suggest that 10 out of 10 times, whether it's necessary or not. We always say get it done, peace of mind, and that way you can move on. And we've taken it one step further, because the market's tightened up. We like to make it as user-friendly as possible, so we'll very often get our sellers to do that prior to going to the market, and that way making it as easy as possible for all our consumers.
It's a very good, it's a good idea, because you never know. And no one really enters a transaction, I don't believe, with bad intentions. It just happens to be a situation they haven't even been aware of,
Exactly.
the vendor themselves.
Exactly, yeah. And from the seller's perspective, not only does it add peace of mind to the buyers when they're buying, but from a seller's perspective, if there's a leering problem, now they're aware of it and they'll take that into account or get it fixed or put it in the account with the price. So again, it's always a good thing to do.
Excellent. Have you noticed, are there any buyers that are coming to you that say they're looking for vacant land or in areas that they want to really use it as their blank masterpiece?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, locals that's a big one right now. Locals looking to build, and the climate is very much ready for those build opportunities. And we've sold a couple of bigger transactions over the last couple of years, and they've been vacant land because again, you can put your own stamp on it. Build costs aren't exorbitant. And if people can kind of put together their dream home and say, hey, we want it perfect, then that's the only way that you want to do that, because otherwise there are elements of compromise with most properties.
Fantastic. So the open house process, when you arrive on the day, give me a basic rundown of what it is about the open house that you enjoy.
Yeah, okay. Well, open house is a really easy way for a seller to display their property to the market for a couple of reasons. Number one, it works well for the seller because they can account for, okay, we've got 2 open homes this weekend or 3 this week, and we need to have it ready between X and X. So it works well in terms of a logistical perspective for them. But from a buyer's perspective, it gives them the ability to come through the property without having to outwardly contact the agent, because particularly in the high end of the market, what we find is that buyers and consumers at large are very apprehensive to contact salespeople, which I think they've got every right to be, because if we go to for example, a clothing store, there's nothing worse than when you're looking through a rack and someone just talks to you or harasses you and keeps chasing you up, and there's definitely that sentiment out there. So if buyers can come through an open home and be quite ambiguous and not talk to the agent too much, they'll much rather opt with that than a private inspection, which is a little bit more personalised. That being said, it's always good to layer it with private inspections as well. But going back to open homes at large, it's always a good kind of indicator as to how the property is tracking, because if you're getting 20 inspections at an open home, you know that it's a well-priced or well-positioned piece of stock, well-positioned property. But if you've got really low numbers, then there's probably a problem, whether it be pricing, presentation, or the agent. So they're things that we can address quite outwardly, simply based on open homes. So there's an array of positive things come off the back of it. So
should the vendor expect feedback from their agent that is in depth about the numbers coming in and who the types of people? Or
absolutely, and again, that's probably what we pride ourselves on very much, is just how thorough we are with what are the buyers saying, how are they saying it, where are they coming from, what market trends can we track, if we can move, will we, and what do we need to do? So yeah, absolutely, no doubt about it. And we find that for whatever reason, we run into some sellers that say that they haven't heard from their agent. For us, that's really, really concerning, because these are the biggest transactions for most families across the Gold Coast or across Australia. So for us, that is no doubt about it, very, very important to keep them informed and in an in-depth way.
It's the largest asset generally. I think the stat is something like 80% of people. It's the largest asset that they'll hold.
100%.
So you would expect them to be doing their research, and you would want them to do their research and speak to their agent and expect more from their agent, I suppose.
Yeah, that's broadly speaking. There's other agents that do it really, really well, but I think Australia at large, we're quite lucky. I think that most of our agents are quite good. I'd like to think anyway. I think we've got a good work ethic.
You touched on it before, and I find this interesting. And this is more of a sort of an advisory conversation, I would suppose. But for me, as soon as I see a property that I like, my instant reaction is to pick up the phone and call the agent. Because how I'm conditioned is the only way you're going to get the full story is if you get the agent on the phone. Yeah. Because he'll tell you what, and you can ask him questions. And if you think that maybe, or he or she, if you think that they're giving you information that is not believable, it's up to you to then double check it, and then you can obviously call them out on it. But would you rather receive the phone calls, or are you happy to respond to emails, or realistically you want people to come and look at it because that's the only way to get the best idea?
Number one priority is drive the inquiry. How do you get the phone to ring, or how do you get them to the open home? Either or, it's a positive result. So all of our marketing is orientated around getting that phone call exactly, because it gives us the opportunity to feel out where the buyers are at, gives us the opportunity to educate the buyer, and it gives us that opportunity to then sell the property and relay that to the seller, of course. So for us, we love the phone calls. Company policy, ideally every call is returned within half an hour. Again, case by case, and there's circumstances to that. But yeah, we love the phone calls and keep them coming.
I just think that it's the most logical way to get the information in the quickest way, instead of sending an email.
Yeah.
But we're sticklers about that. So a lot of the content that we put online is people to make sure they're doing their homework, do their research, and pick up the phone and build relationships.
Love it.
So if there's an off-market opportunity, for example, are you getting buyers that come to you and say, Jesse, is there anything that you've got that isn't being advertised?
Yep.
Okay. And what do you think is driving them?
What's driving those buyers? Well, again, people that miss out on properties, typically they're our premium buyers. If they've been in the market for a couple of months and they've missed out and they're chomping at the bit to get into a suburb of choice, they'll call an agent and say, hey, have you got any options for us? And very often we will, because on the flip side of that, we've got many sellers that want to sell their place but don't want to actively go to the market or don't want to invest in the marketing, or there's an array of kind of problems with that in some cases. So, and the other incentive that we're doing at the moment, and again, because the market's tightened, we need to move with the climate. And what we actually say to a lot of our sellers is, prior to going to the market, give us the opportunity to get our hot buyers through and let them know there's an off-market opportunity here. We'll also contact other agents that work in the area, that specialise in the area, and give them that opportunity too. So then we're kind of killing two birds with one stone. You're giving the seller the peace of mind to say, oh, okay, yep, we've gotten some buyers through and it may be worth between X and X now based on their feedback. But from a buyer's perspective, to get a phone call from an agent saying, hey, I've got a great opportunity for you, it's exciting. And sometimes we can even prompt that to be our premium buyer because they don't want that property to go on the market. So for us, it's a great thing to do, and many sellers are opting with that at the moment.
So a good strategy for people, if they're approaching an agent and there's nothing on the market that suits them at the time. Maybe that's a question.
Absolutely. And for example, just before I came to this meeting, we've got a great new north-facing property that's coming on in Broadbeach Waters, and we've just sent out a VIP exclusive invite to the agents that work in the area and our database of roughly 500 buyers are looking within that suburb at the moment. So I'm really excited, and that VIP is tomorrow night, so see what those numbers bring. We'll sit down with the seller and say, hey, this was the activity, what do you want to do? Should we price it? Should we auction it?
You can analyse.
Exactly right, and then have more of an educated approach as more of a speculative approach.
So how do you set a price? Or it's called an appraisal.
Yeah, how does that work? Case by case. I can't give away all my secrets.
No, understood. But in general, what do they?
We do what our buyers do. So typically what buyers do, they've got access to every sale that's transacted within a certain period, and we can't hide that. We're not the gatekeepers of prices, is essentially what it, and that our role has changed than what it was, say, 20 years ago. Now we need to be really open with our sellers, we need to be open with our buyers, and say, okay, realistically it's going to be sitting between X and Y because of X, Y, Z in terms of comparable sales and things like that. But particularly in the high end of the market, there are always nuances to that. You might have quality of build, you might have the north aspect, you might have a bigger than normal block. So
celebrity ownership.
Exactly.
Which surprisingly matters.
Is that a thing?
Surprisingly.
I'd buy a property.
I know down in Byron Bay there were a couple of sales that had massive premiums on them because one of the Hemsworths had laid his hammer upon it. Good on him.
Sorry. I want this property. What does it cost? I'll pay whatever it takes.
Let's go. We're all going to go. Okay, sorry. So there are strategies, but I really like that. Do what the buyers do.
Exactly, and again, so we then run those buyers through that within a rough guide. We then sit down with the sellers and say, hey, this is what the buyers are saying. What do you want to do? So again, we don't speculate as much as we used to. We're a lot more informed now based on access to online sales in terms of the buyers, and then also our approach of running the buyers through the property, and then that way it's not the agent simply telling the seller what they want to hear, which often they'll do. They'll list a property just to get it online and they'll overinflate it, so then the seller's all happy and says, off you go. Or adversely, we can unconsciously underprice it, and then they don't need us. So again, it's a little bit of give and take, and I think right now the power of an agent is in their marketing skills. How many people can get through the door, or how many people can get our phone to ring, and also in terms of negotiation skills. So if you couple that great marketing and good negotiation skills, you're inevitably going to get a good result.
Balance.
That's it.
There's a balance to it. So what is one experience then that has stuck with you on your entire real estate journey now that you think would be beneficial to somebody that's looking to either buy their first home or buy their last home? It's just something that you've experienced that maybe you'll think it's common knowledge, but I'm sure that it'll be.
I would suggest to buyers, if you're a buyer out there, definitely attend auctions, educate yourself with the market. As you touched on before, get buddy with some agents, because it's always good. If you're what an agent considers a hot buyer, then you're probably going to be a step ahead of the marketplace in terms of transactions that are happening, and also what else is going to be coming to the market. So definitely build a relationship with agents. I think that could go a really, really long way.
I agree. I fully agree with you. Wonderful. Jesse, thank you very much for your time.